Joining me now is defense attorney Joe Tacopina. He previously represented President Donald Trump in the civil lawsuit brought by E. Jean Carroll and recently successfully represented A$AP Rocky when he was acquitted on felony gun charges back in February. Joe, thanks so much for being with us. President Trump not ruling out a pardon for Diddy if the music mogul is convicted. He told reporters that he's going to, quote, look at the facts. Given what you know about the president, do you think he really would consider a pardon?
I mean, I wouldn't put much stock into that back and forth. That was an off-the-cuff question by a reporter. The president wasn't scripted, obviously, and he simply said, look, having been through what he's been through, 4 prosecutions in 1 year, none of which were successful, I think he's a little sensitive to, unjust prosecutions. So I think what he was simply saying was that he'd look at it. Of course, that has now become headline news and a story and everything else. One thing he was also clear about is no one's asked him on Diddy's behalf for a pardon. I think we're putting the cart way before the horse here. First of all, there needs to be a conviction. And secondly, if there is a conviction, is this sort of a case that the president would pardon and set aside a jury verdict? I just don't think so. But honestly, Boris, if I'm the defense team right now, this is the last thing I want us talking about or anyone talking about, because the last thing I want is the jury to hear that, oh, so wait a minute. If we convict him, there's a chance that perhaps he's not even going to go to jail. Oh, so then the pressure's really off us. So let's just convict him because, look, what's proven in this case is Diddy is a bad guy. What's proven in this case is Diddy's a criminal, okay, in regards to domestic abuse and in regards to drug use. What's proven in guns, and what's proven in this case is that he is a domestic batterer, okay? All bad things, not a good guy. What's not necessarily proven is he's a racketeer. These are charges, not domestic assault charges, okay? So there's a lot of things been proven in this case. I still don't believe what's been proven at that is that he's a sex trafficker or a racketeer. And those are the big burdens that the prosecution has to meet here. So I'm not so convinced that this case is going all that well for them.
When it comes to the idea, the potential for a pardon, you're right that as far as we know, nobody from Diddy's camp has requested one. Somebody has spoken out already against one without there even being a conviction, and that's 50 Cent, arguably the greatest troll of all time. He's been sharing these videos on Instagram of Diddy appearing to criticize Donald Trump in the past. I wonder how much some of that criticism might be a factor in a decision to potentially pardon not just Diddy, but anyone else, because there is a perception, at least lately, that some of the pardons that the White House has issued are in part because of folks that have tried to curry favor with the president. What do you think?
Well, look, I don't think it's as simple as that. I think when he pardons someone, he believes that they've been either treated unfairly by the system or that there's a just reason to issue a pardon. Okay, I know people are quick to say, oh, he's doing favors to people who are good to him. I don't think he's making that evaluation. That being said, I do know that if someone has a lot of awful things to say about him, that is something he's going to consider when he's evaluating whether someone deserves a pardon or not. Again, this is not the sort of case, to me, that if a jury finds guilt here, that the president's likely to upset that verdict. I just don't believe he would. Again, he needs to understand the facts of this case, but knowing the facts of this case, I don't think he would based on the type of evidence that's been presented. Again, I still think there's a big void where the evidence of racketeering enterprise should be and guilt in this case. But look, look, this is what the prosecution's theory was all along. Make him out to be one of the worst human beings that's ever walked the face of this earth. Make him out to be a very unlikable guy, a batterer of women, an abuser of people lower than he, someone who's not nice to anyone, it seems like, and someone who's willing to lose his mind over someone interfering with his relationships with women. Have they proven he's a completely insane, jealous boyfriend? Absolutely. Does that make him part of a racketeering enterprise? Boris, I guess the jury's going to have to decide that, but this case is not that simple. I mean, we're spending days in federal court talking about baby oil and applesauce on burgers. I mean, this is not the sort of stuff you hear in federal racketeering trials for the most part.
Joe Tacopina, fascinating to hear from you on this. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, Morris, thank you.